Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I am Nick Dimitrazik, and I work on EFC's Community Assistance Teams Initiative. I want to welcome you to our first in a series of May Lunch and Learn webinars. So each Tuesday throughout the month of May, we'll invite a different agency to come and discuss their opportunities for water infrastructure funding. So today we have staff from the Environmental Facilities Corporation, along with the Department of Health, and we'll be discussing our opportunities through the state revolving funds and state water grants. Some quick housekeeping before we begin. We'll have a Q&A session with staff following the presentation. If you have any questions while we're presenting, you can put them in the chat below and we'll get to them at the end. And additionally, throughout the slides today, there are a couple of QR codes which can be scanned and will take you to the relevant web pages for the programs. So turning now to an agenda, we'll talk a little bit about EFC and what we do. We'll go into the state revolving funds and talk about opportunities for financing, eligibility, hardship, and scoring. We'll then talk about our grant programs, our technical assistance opportunities, and close with a Q&A. So a little bit about EFC and what we do. So we have our Clean Water State Revolving Fund that provides low-cost capital for sewer and wastewater treatment projects. We then have our Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, which is a sister program to our Clean Water program, and that provides low-cost capital for drinking water projects. And then finally, we have water grants. So where does that get us? It gets us to a nation-leading investment. So since 1990, we've been able to provide over $37 billion to wastewater projects. Since 1996 and the inception of the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, we've been able to provide over $10 billion to drinking water projects. And since 2015, we've provided almost $2.9 billion in water grants to over 1,000 projects. So this is just an overview of the types of financing that we offer. So we have short-term and long-term. We have market rate, subsidized or interest-free, and we also offer financial assistance. So looking at our short-term or long-term financing, we have short-term of up to 5 years available, and this is typically going to be for the design and construction of a project. And then we also have our long-term financing, and that's going to be up to 30 years. So we have a couple of different rates that we're all able to provide. So we first have our market rate, and that's based on the FC's bond rating for projects with a score below the subsidy line within the intended use plan, which we'll discuss a little bit later. We have our subsidized interest rates, which is partial for drinking water and partial for clean water. This is for projects that score above the subsidy line. And to note, for the 2025 intended use plan, the drinking water subsidy line was at 60 points, and the clean water intended use plan did not have a subsidy. And then finally, for projects that qualify as hardship, we can also provide interest-free financing. So this is just an overview of all the different opportunities. So we have our engineering planning grant, our water infrastructure improvement grant program, our intermunicipal grant program. We have a couple of resiliency programs that we'll discuss further. We also have federal infrastructure grants through IJA. And then finally, we have our state revolving fund grants. So at this point, I will turn it over to Gabby to discuss the state revolving fund.
Hi, everyone. So like Nick said, this is the diagram for the New York State Revolving Fund. At the top, you see seed money, and that's our annual grant from the US EPA, along with a 20% state match from New York. And that's what's used to capitalize the SRF programs. And then the repayments go in and the bond proceeds. So SRF loans operate on a revolving basis. And so each year those funds are loaned to communities. And then as that principal is repaid, the money cycles back into the program to support new water quality improvement projects. Through bond sales and proactive fund management, we maximize the amount of money available for the SRF loans. So at the bottom, then you'll see that low-cost funding. That's what we're able to provide communities for wastewater and drinking water infrastructure projects. And once again, those bond repayments with the low interest rates. So our intended use plan is the first step to accessing funds from the SRF. It's the foundational document. It is prepared annually as required by law. It outlines each program, identifies the funds available for projects, and then explains how those funds are to be allocated. So to determine how those funds are used, we use the project ranking and scoring process. Each project submission is reviewed, scored, and ranked according to its water quality and public health impacts. And then eligible costs are based on documented estimates from engineering reports, plans and specs, and contract awards. Within each IUP, there are project priority lists, which highlight projects eligible for funding. We have the multi-year list, which includes all projects, both that are have expressed interest in financial assistance, as well as those that may receive some. And then the annual list, which identifies projects eligible to receive SRF financial assistance in that current federal fiscal year. Generally, projects they're required to submit an approvable engineering report to move from the multi-year list to the annual list.
Hi, this is Dorian, engineer with EFC. Just going to go through the types of projects that would be eligible for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. And we administer this fund in coordination with the Department of Environmental Conservation, DEC. So we offer affordable financings for communities and public authorities for sewer projects, and that includes repairing and upgrading wastewater treatment plants. It also includes new wastewater treatment plants, sewer and collection systems, projects that will correct combined or sanitary sewer overflows, and non-point source projects that would protect water bodies from runoff pollution.
This is Ashley Hyde from the Bureau of Water Supply Protection at the New York State Department of Health. I wanted to chime in and discuss the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, and our main goals and eligible projects are to address public health issues and provide safe drinking water to the public. So we can help install or upgrade water treatment facilities. We can help install or replace water distribution mains, rehab or develop new sources, especially if a water source is contaminated. And if a community is in need of new storage or different types of storage. Those are just a few of the eligible projects, and always happy to answer questions if you're wondering if your project is eligible. Thanks.
Okay, and I'm going to go through the list of eligible entities to receive SRF funding. Generally, municipalities are eligible, and that includes any county, city, town, or village, district corporation, county or town improvement district, school district, Indian nation with boundaries that are at least partially within New York State, a public benefit, New York Public Benefit Corporation or public authority, or New York State agencies. Back to Ashley.
On the drinking water side, we can provide financing to community water systems, municipally owned or privately owned, and non-community water systems as well. If you are specifically looking for grants or additional subsidy or interest-free financing, you would have to be a municipality, as EFC just discussed, or a privately owned system that is regulated by the New York State Public Service Commission.
Next is we'll go over the steps to accessing financing. So like I said, first is optional, but you can list your project on the multi-year list. By filling out a simple form, you can list the project here, and then you can be assigned a project team, and they can offer guidance as you move forward with funding for your project. Note that the listing process for clean water and drinking water projects differ. Next up is listing your project on the annual list. So when you're ready to actually apply for SRF funding, you'll submit an acceptable engineering report, a timeline, a plan of finance, And then you can be listed on the annual list, which is once again required before you can access that funding. Your project score on the annual list determines what type of funding your project is eligible for. Then you'll prepare your required documents. So once you are on the annual list, you are then eligible for financing from EFC. So then there are a few more documents required for your funding application, which includes the bond resolutions, budget information, environmental review, among all those other things that are listed on the screen. And then just for you to know, for the 2026 IUP, new project listings and project updates are due by May 30th, 2025.
Okay, and as Gabby mentioned, an engineering report is required in order for the project to be listed on the annual list. And so I'm just going to go through some of the elements of an engineering report, what it includes, the project background and history, the description of what the problem is that the project will address, list of alternatives and analysis of the alternatives, and a selection of one of the alternatives that will propose a capital project. Any discussion of objectives that meet environmental justice, resiliency, or green infrastructure goals, consideration to future climate impacts, and discussion of security and cybersecurity. In order to be listed on the annual list, we do an acceptability review, which is a little different than our full technical review, to make sure that each report has key elements to be included on the annual list. Those include things like it must be a current report within the last 5 years, should be a final version and not a draft version of the report, has to be stamped by a New York State licensed PE. In addition, has to include the alternatives analysis that I mentioned previously. Next slide, please. So projects funded with EFC also have to meet certain requirements. So all contracts have to include EFC's terms and conditions. And there's 3 separate versions of the terms and conditions based on the funding source. The program requirements include MWBE and Equal Employment Opportunity, SDVOB, American Iron and Steel, and Davis-Bacon prevailing wages. Also, all engineering agreements must be procured following the federal qualifications-based bidding guidelines. And that those include requirements for publicly bidding, selecting a firm, ranking the firm, and entering into the contract. And then projects that are designated as equivalency projects have to meet additional federal requirements and may include BABA and DBE. All these terms and conditions versions are on our website, and if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to your EFC project engineer. Also, one more thing is to remember, submit your plan specifications 60 days prior to bidding. Slide. So when we get projects on the annual list, we will rank them and score them. The scoring is generally based on whether the project will make improvements or restore water quality. Those are given the highest points. Secondary priority would be protecting water quality. And then we also give consideration to projects in communities of financial hardship. The scoring system was recently updated to include additional points for projects that bolster resiliency, mitigate climate change, mitigate the impacts of climate change, and then also strengthening cybersecurity for wastewater utilities and taking septic systems out of service. Slide. So this is a screenshot of our scoring matrix that we use for every project and a breakdown of the maximum points that you could get for each category. So the criteria are under existing pollutants, water quality, consistency with a management plan, typically a watershed management plan, the need of the project, financial need, and any resiliency. The full rubric, that's just the cover page of the rubric on the left, and the full rubric is available on our website if you wanted to read the specific criteria we're looking for in each category and the different breakdown of points assigned. If you go to the next page, I have some scoring tips here. Just things to make sure you include with your engineering report submission to ensure we can get the full picture and properly score the project. So you want to definitely ensure you have documentation of water quality impacts and how the project would impact water quality. You'll want to include documentation of any permit requirements or enforcement actions that require the project to be completed. These could include a schedule of compliance, for instance, or possibly a consent order to do the project. You should include whether or not the project is identified in an approved asset management program. Those programs include a capital improvement plan section, and if the project's included in those, it will get additional points. Any discussion of climate resiliency improvements or cybersecurity enhancements that are being completed by the project should be included. And then also, if there are any green infrastructure practices or water or energy efficiency improvements, those should also be included, as you'll get additional points for those. Slide.
It's Ashley again from the Department of Health. I'm chiming back in on the drinking water side to discuss scoring. This is just a snapshot. Definitely not the full criteria that we use, but we wanted to show at least a piece of this. If you'd like the full version of our criteria, you can find it on our website by searching the statement here on the slide or clicking on that link. But we use technical factors and governmental factors or non-technical factors like financial and governmental factors to give you an overall public health score for each project. So if you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out. Some scoring tips on the next slide are to be sure to include relevant documentation for any violations or any documentations that just outline the public health hazards or risks at your water system. This can include an actual letter from your local health department, any documentation from sanitary surveys that have been recently completed, or any lab data showing exceedances of maximum contaminant levels or things like that. So the more information we have and is the best, and to help paint that overall public health picture is ideal. Thanks.
Now we'll just discuss a little bit about our different hardship criteria. So for CWSRF, the municipal criteria is less than 80% of regionally adjusted median household income, MHI, or 80% to less than 100% of regionally adjusted MHI, and poverty greater than statewide poverty rates. The federal fiscal year 2026 IUP will be based on the 2023 American Community Survey ACS data. Alternative means for establishing hardship include conducting an income survey. So if the MHI for the project area is suspected to be less than the ACS MHI data, the income survey can help determine, like I said, hardship. Income survey requirements are in the hardship policy on our website. There's also the ratepayer impact. So if a municipality can demonstrate that ratepayers will experience significant hardship from the rate increase based on project financing, and that the interest-free financing of the hardship can benefit those individual ratepayers. And that they can also ensure that the interest-free financing will be directed to them. That might also be an opportunity to receive hardship financing. And then this is back to Ashley.
Yeah, thank you. So we have mostly similar criteria to the clean water side. We do have on the drinking water side, there is a municipal population component. it has to be less than 300,000 to be considered for hardship unless you have an income survey that EFC was just discussing to show that the project service area is less than 300,000. Please note that the population threshold of 300,000 does not apply to the lead service line program. You go to the next slide, our affordability criteria is the same as the clean water. So the less than 80% of the regionally adjusted MHI, or if you're greater than that, we look at poverty level, and we will also be switching to the 2023 American Community Survey data for this next round of funding. I think there was a question in the chat about how we define the regionally adjusted MHI. We include that in our intended use plan, and those thresholds and the regional cost factors are established by New York State Education Department.
As for the state revolving fund application, like I've mentioned, the project must be on the annual list to receive SRF funding. The application is used for both the CW SRF and the DW SRF. And required documents for the application is the SRF financing application, bond resolution, environmental review, SHPO letter, and a district formation if applicable. We do have federal funding that is being administered through the SRF over 5 years. CW General Supplemental or for municipal water projects such as wastewater treatment facilities, pumping stations. The DW General Supplemental funds also municipally owned and privately owned community water systems, as well as nonprofit, non-community water projects serving disadvantaged communities. We also have funding for emerging contaminants that obviously address ECs like PFAS that pose risk to human health in the environment. And then lastly, the DW SRF has funding for lead service line replacement. So just the identification of and replacement of lead service lines.
Hello, my name is Paul Kutcha, and I'm a program coordinator with EFC. And I'm going to talk about some of EFC's grant programs today. So we have several types of grants that are offered by EFC. The first is the Water Infrastructure Improvement Grant, or WIA. Next is the Intermunicipal Water Infrastructure Grant, or IMG. WIA and IMG normally work pretty well together, but we'll go through them in detail later. Next up, we have the two green resiliency green grants. We have the Green Resiliency Grant, or GRG, and the Green Innovation Grant Program, or GIGP. Lastly, we also have the Engineering Planning Grant, which is we'll go through in a minute. One thing to note that the EPG and Green Innovation Grant Program, GIGP, can only be used for clean water projects. All right, so we'll talk briefly about the Engineering Planning Grant. These are funding for hardship communities to pay for the initial planning costs for eligible CW SRF projects. Grant awards are up to $50,000 for most projects, or $100,000 for infiltration studies required by a consent order or speedies violation. These have a different MHI requirement depending on which regional economic district you're in. Please note that these MHI values can be different than the hardship requirements for the CW SRF or DW SRF programs for their hardship requirements. The EPG grant at this point is only available for clean water projects. Okay, and then one of the biggest grant programs we have is the Water Infrastructure Improvement Grants, or WIA. WIA provides competitive grants to help communities affordably undertake critical wastewater and drinking water projects. In order to apply for a WIA grant, and it's the similar municipal guidelines to the CW or DW SRF programs, you have to be a city, town, or village, authority district, Indian Nation. If you're curious whether you would qualify for this, we could definitely go through the guidelines for that. Grants for the clean water projects are available for sewage treatment works, but they only have a stormwater scope if it's related to a sanitary sewer. Municipalities will be awarded up to 25% of total net eligible project costs, including phases of the project, up to $25 million total. If your awarded grants exceed $5 million, grants will be allocated over multiple years in increments of up to $5 million per year. Next is the grants for drinking water projects. Municipalities will be awarded 60% of total net eligible project costs, including costs for all phases, up to $5 million. And $5 million is the max you can receive in DW SRF grant and or WIA grant per year for those. Projects addressing emerging contaminant above the state determined maximum contaminant level, or MCL, may be awarded 60% of total net eligible project costs with no cap. I'm sorry, 70%, my mistake there. Next, we'll talk about the intermunicipal grants. These are available for both clean water and drinking water projects undertaken jointly by multiple municipalities. This can cover a grant of up to 40% of costs, up to $30 million. You do need to have one lead municipality that applies on the behalf of all cooperating municipalities. And this is available for both drinking water and clean water projects. This is to help with large-scale capital infrastructure, such as shared water quality infrastructure, consolidating intermunicipal facilities, or interconnects. For this, you do need to have a current, valid, and binding project intermunicipal agreement, or an IMA, between at least two of the cooperating municipalities. Please note that if you have an IMA, the requirement for an IMA is not fulfilled by having an existing contract to sell water or to sell sewer services to another municipality. You need to have a specific IMA for the purposes of the IMG. If you've got any questions or whether your current intermunicipal agreements would suffice for this, definitely reach out and we can take a look at those. And as many of you saw, we had a big announcement for our GRG program. So on Earth Day, Governor Hochul announced $60 million in Environmental Bond Act funding for the next round of our Green Resiliency Grants program, or GRG. This helps support vital stormwater management resilient infrastructure projects in flood-prone communities across New York State. So the GRG programs are designed to support flood-prone communities and implementing transformative green infrastructure projects that combat the effects of climate change in particular. Projects must have a minimum total project cost of $1 million and be capable of capturing, treating, or reducing a minimum of 100,000 cubic feet of stormwater runoff annually. So we just wrapped up some funding for these last October. So for example, we have the Buffalo Sewer Authority, which got $8.75 million for their Rain Check 2.0 park projects to implement stormwater tree trenches, rain gardens, underwater stormwater storage systems, and porous pavement in 5 parks. Another example project is the City of North Tonawanda got $1.5 million for the Oliver Street Green Infrastructure Improvement Project to convert impervious terrace back to green space, reduce pavement width, plant street trees, and install structural soils and bioretention areas. So the GRG projects tend to be much larger in scope. We'll go over the GIGP programs in a sec. Please note that the GRG program is now open for applications. So if you are interested or if you have a project you want to have reviewed, you can look at setting up a meeting with the community assistance teams or look for details on the EFC website. The other green program that we have, this one did just close, is the Green Innovation Grant Program, or GIGP, which supports water quality projects that utilize EPA-designated green stormwater infrastructure to mitigate the effects of climate change. These are grants of up to 90% of costs up to $3 million, and your project needs to be in one of 4 different areas, either green stormwater infrastructure, energy efficiency, water efficiency, or environmental innovation. Compared to GRG, GIGP projects tend to be slightly smaller in scale because it is working off of EPA designated infrastructure projects. They fund slightly different projects between the two. So if you have any green infrastructure projects, please look at setting up a meeting and we'd be happy to review which one would work best for your municipality or their participating entity. So one of the most important things we can do is help set up co-funding opportunities. So co-funding can be used for both pre-planning, engineering, report cost for financing projects. We will have an upcoming co-funding workshop that will go through some of the available opportunities and some of the ways that different types of co-funding can be sort of chained together. So one of the big things is you can look at funding your planning costs. So so for example, the cost to prepare an engineering report. Under EFC, we have the EPG environmental planning, or sorry, engineering planning grant that we talked about, which can be used to prepare a planning document for use with the CW SRF financing. But you can also look at going to HCR and use one of their CDBG community development block grants and use that to fund your engineering report as well. For example, for drinking water projects. For drinking water, you can also be reimbursed from your DWSRF funding. After planning, implementation is usually done using the state revolving funds, a CDBG community block grant through HCR, or the water infrastructure grants like WIA. You may also need to look at getting an income survey done, which you can do using, for example, HCR can help fund those types of resources. So our community assistance is broadly works with sort of 5 different entities. We've got EFC, which is us. We work very heavily with both Department of Health for drinking water projects and New York DEC as part of our drinking water and clean water projects. But we also work with Department of State very heavily for their Appalachian Regional Council and Northern Borders Regional Council, and also with Homes and Community Renewal for their Community Development Block Grant. And we will have separate lunch and learns talking about each of these agencies and what funding opportunities they have available. So I highly encourage people to show up and see what funding opportunities are available. So for a good example of a clean water co-funding project, we have the Chemung County Treatment Plant Consolidation. This is a very large project that was able to take advantage of Water Infrastructure Improvement Act, so WIA, the Water Quality Improvement Program, WQIP through DEC, a grant through the Appalachian Regional Council through Department of State, and they also got federal funding as well. So by combining funding sources from basically a lot of different resources, they were able to effectively fund a very large project. And I'll turn this over to Ashley for a similarly funded drinking water project.
Thank you. So we'd like to take a moment to highlight another co-funded project on the drinking water side, where this is Hounsfield, town of Hounsfield, for their Water District 3. This included the formation and the construction of Water District 7 and interconnection with the village of Sackett's Harbor. So it was a successfully co-funded program or project with the 2017 WIA grant, as well as the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund short-term market rate loan, as well as a grant and a loan from USDA Rural Development.
Great, thank you, Ashley. This is Nick again with EFC. So I just wanted to plug again, as Paul mentioned, we have a couple of additional lunch and learns that we're going to be holding throughout the month of May. So on May 13th, we'll have the Department of State on to discuss their local government efficiency program, the Northern Borders Regional Commission, their Appalachian Regional Commission. And then on May 20th, we'll have the Department of Environmental Conservation on to discuss their water quality improvement program and their NPG program. And then finally, on the 27th of May, we'll have Homes and Community Renewal on to discuss their Community Development Block Grant. So I would highly suggest signing up for those. We'll also have recordings of each of these available following webinars. And then again, I'll just plug our community assistance teams. So we're available if you need any assistance. We can set up a consultation with any of the agencies that we work with to discuss your projects and see what programs they would be eligible for. We also hold webinars such as this, and on the next slide too, I'll suggest signing up for our e-blasts. So we'll send out announcements when grants are going live, or upcoming webinars, any events we're holding, and then when deadlines are approaching. So I would highly suggest signing up for that. And that takes care of it for today. So I want to thank everybody for being here. We have a couple of emails on the screen. So our first one is cwsrfinfo@efc.ny.gov. So you can send any questions related to clean water to that email address. And then we also have design@health.ny.gov for anything related to drinking water. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing our screen. And I'll also stop the recording.